But I don't take disrespect lightly, and she disrespected Alexis and my girls.
Angel Reese just confirmed what fans suspected. Caitlin Clark isn't just disliked by her. A lot of the WNBA players want her gone. And word is, some of the league's biggest names are already plotting to make her rookie season a living nightmare. We have all of the gist. Let's break it all down. The genesis of resentment. The relationship between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark didn't begin with hatred, animosity, or even dislike, but rather with what appeared to be mutual respect forged through years of intense competition on basketball courts across America. Both players have repeatedly emphasized that their dynamic traces back to their AAU and high school days, where they competed against each other in grassroots circuits that would eventually shape them into the elite athletes they've become today. As Reese noted in what many consider to be a moment of rare honesty about their relationship, "We've been playing against each other since high school. It's really just the fans." But the narrative of mutual respect and competitive camaraderie began to crack under the weight of mounting evidence that suggested something far more complex and troubling was brewing beneath the surface. The pivotal moment that would define their relationship forever and arguably change the trajectory of women's basketball occurred on April 2nd, 2023, during the NCAA championship game that would be watched by millions and dissected by analysts for years to come. When LSU defeated Iowa 102-85, it wasn't just the comprehensive victory on the court that made headlines across the nation. It was Angel Reese's now infamous taunt directed squarely at Caitlin Clark that would spark debates about sportsmanship, race, media coverage, and the very nature of competition in women's sports. In the final moments of LSU's decisive victory, Reese directed John Cena's "You can't see me" gesture and pointed to her ring finger toward Clark, sparking widespread debate that would extend far beyond the basketball court and into living rooms, social media platforms, and sports commentary shows across America. The gesture itself might have seemed innocuous to casual observers, but it represented something much deeper and more significant than a simple moment of celebration. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating and reveals layers of complexity that most media coverage has failed to explore adequately. The gesture that sparked national controversy, congressional discussions, and millions of social media interactions wasn't born out of pure malice, unprovoked aggression, or spontaneous disrespect. Instead, it was a calculated response rooted in what Reese perceived as previous disrespect that had gone largely unnoticed by the media and unpunished by officials.
But I don't take disrespect lightly, and she disrespected Alexis and my girls. South Carolina, they still my SEC girls too. But y'all not gonna disrespect them either.
Angel Reese later explained with a passion and conviction that suggested this moment had been building for weeks, if not months, that her taunt was retaliation for Clark's earlier gestures against other players, including her SEC peers like Raven Johnson from South Carolina, whom Reese considered family in the tight-knit world of women's college basketball. Remarkably, and perhaps most tellingly for understanding the true nature of their relationship at that time, Clark herself defended Reese's actions in a way that seemed genuine and heartfelt.
I don't think Angel should be criticized at all. No matter which way it goes, she should never be criticized for what she did.
This defense was significant not just for its content, but for its timing and apparent sincerity, suggesting that at least from Clark's perspective, the gesture was understood and accepted as part of competitive basketball. However, as we'll see, this moment of apparent understanding and mutual respect would prove to be the high watermark of their relationship, after which things would steadily deteriorate as professional pressures, media attention, financial opportunities, and external influences began to drive a wedge between two players who might otherwise have maintained a healthy competitive relationship. When both players entered the WNBA in 2024, Clark as the #1 pick to Indiana Fever, and Reese as #7 to Chicago Sky, their rivalry took on entirely new dimensions that neither player, their teams, nor the league itself seemed fully prepared to handle. The proximity of their teams, just 182 miles apart, amplified the media hype exponentially, but it also intensified the scrutiny of every interaction between them, every gesture, every comment, and every social media post. But what many didn't realize at the time was that Angel Reese's animosity toward Caitlin Clark was just the beginning. As Clark entered the professional ranks, a disturbing pattern began to emerge across the entire league. Multiple veteran players across different teams have shown patterns of behavior toward Clark that go beyond normal basketball competition or typical rookie hazing. The evidence isn't subtle. Across multiple teams and countless interactions, a troubling pattern has emerged that suggests Caitlin Clark faces antagonism from fellow players that extends far beyond what any rookie should expect to encounter. The most explosive example came from Chicago Sky guard Chennedy Carter, who delivered a deliberate off-ball shoulder check to Clark that knocked her to the ground. This wasn't basketball, this was a message. Carter appeared to mouth "you" before the hit and later posted on social media. And that's that on that cause. Beside three-point shooting, what does she bring to the table? Man. When asked about the incident, Carter refused to answer questions about Clark, stating, "I ain't answering no Caitlin Clark questions." The dismissiveness was telling. This wasn't about basketball competition. This was personal. The tensions reached new heights during the 2025 All-Star Weekend when Las Vegas Aces guard Kelsey Plum publicly called out Team Clark for missing a player-led pay protest meeting, stating, "Not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that." The comment was seen as unnecessarily divisive and targeting Clark despite her injury status. Perhaps most concerning is Connecticut Sun's J.C. Sheldon, whose college rivalry with Clark has translated into what many view as targeted harassment in the pros. During their June 2025 matchup, multiple incidents occurred, including Sheldon poking Clark in the eye, leading to a bench-clearing altercation. Even more troubling, in their July rematch, Sheldon allegedly drove her knee into Clark's groin, causing visible pain and forcing Clark to exit the game. The pattern of accidents involving Sheldon and Clark has become impossible to ignore. The numbers don't lie. Clark leads the league in flagrant fouls received, with incidents occurring at an alarming rate compared to other rookies or even veteran stars. When players ranked Clark 9th among guards in 2025 All-Star voting despite her leading fan votes and statistical categories, it became clear this wasn't about basketball ability. ESPN analyst Stephen A. Smith cut to the heart of the issue. Clark's games drive revenue, but some veterans resent that she walked in with more endorsement dollars than players who built the league over the course of their entire careers. The jealousy is both financial and cultural. Clark's arrival has tripled WNBA viewership, with games averaging 1.32 million viewers in 2024, compared to 462,000 the previous season. This success has brought unprecedented attention and revenue to the league, but it's also created resentment among players who feel overlooked despite years of dedication to women's basketball. But returning to where it all began, Angel Reese's reaction during that first professional meeting tells us everything we need to know about the true nature of her feelings toward Clark. Their first professional meeting on June 1st, 2024, became a microcosm of the larger tensions brewing not just between the two players, but throughout the entire league as it grappled with unprecedented attention and scrutiny. The Sky won 88-87, but the game was overshadowed by a controversial flagrant foul when Sky guard Chennedy Carter delivered an off-ball shoulder bump to Clark that sent shockwaves through the basketball world and sparked debates about player safety, competitive intensity, and the acceptable limits of physical play in professional women's basketball. What made this incident particularly telling and significant for understanding the true nature of the relationship between Reese and Clark was Angel Reese's reaction from the bench. She was seen clapping and celebrating Carter's aggressive play against Clark in a way that suggested she took genuine pleasure in seeing her rival on the receiving end of hard contact. This wasn't the reaction of a player who simply respected her opponent as a competitor. It was the reaction of someone who wanted to see that opponent hurt, embarrassed, or intimidated. The pattern of behavior continued and escalated throughout their rookie season, creating a narrative that became impossible to ignore, even for those who preferred to focus solely on basketball skills and team performance. In their June 16, 2024 matchup, Reese committed a flagrant foul on Clark by hitting her in the head during a block attempt, an incident that many observers felt was unnecessarily aggressive and potentially dangerous. While Reese defended the play as a basketball play in post-game interviews, the frequency of such incidents involving Clark, particularly in games against Chicago, raised eyebrows among analysts, former players, and fans who had been following women's basketball for decades. The statistical evidence was becoming difficult to ignore, and it painted a picture that many found troubling. The most revealing and potentially explosive moment came during the 2025 season opener on May 17th. Clark committed a flagrant foul on Reese in what appeared to be a standard take. Foul designed to prevent an easy basket, but Reese's reaction was immediate, intense, and telling in ways that would be analyzed and debated for months to come. The confrontation that followed, with Reese appearing to attempt to physically confront Clark before being restrained by teammates. Sports analyst Robert Griffin III, a former professional athlete himself who understood the dynamics of high-level competition, observed the incident closely and made a controversial but telling observation that would spark its own firestorm of debate.
Angel Reese tried to hit her, but if it wasn't for Aaliyah Boston putting her arms in the way, Angel Reese would not be playing basketball anymore because she was gonna sucker punch Caitlin Clark.
The uncomfortable truth. While both Reese and Clark have publicly denied personal animosity, the evidence suggests a more complex reality. Multiple sports analysts and former players have identified what they believe to be clear signs of jealousy and resentment toward Clark from various WNBA players, with Angel Reese often cited as the most visible example. The evidence for this jealousy isn't subtle or hidden. It's apparent to anyone willing to look objectively at the patterns of behavior, public statements, social media activity, and on-court incidents that have defined this rivalry from its earliest days. ESPN analyst Stephen A. Smith, one of the most prominent voices in sports media and someone who has never shied away from controversial topics, has been particularly vocal about this dynamic and has provided some of the most insightful analysis of what's really happening behind the scenes. He noted that Clark's games drive revenue, but some veterans resent that she walked in with more endorsement dollars than players who built the league over the course of their entire careers. Smith observed that there's resentment stemming from Clark's popularity and the disproportionate attention she receives that goes far beyond normal competitive dynamics. The jealousy narrative gained significant credibility and supporting evidence when examining the broader pattern of behavior toward Clark from players throughout the league, not just Angel Reese. In 2025 All-Star voting, players ranked Clark 9th among guards, despite her leading fan votes and statistical categories, prompting accusations of professional jealousy, coordinated efforts to diminish her achievements, and systematic attempts to prevent her from receiving recognition that her performance had clearly earned. This wasn't an oversight, coincidence, or difference of opinion about basketball skills. This was a deliberate attempt by Clark's peers to deny her recognition that would have been automatic for any other player with similar statistics and impact. Jason Whitlock, a controversial but influential sports commentator, has been even more direct in his assessment. He stated that Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark. She hates the one person who might lead the WNBA to profitability. Reese hates the player who has made her rich and famous. While Whitlock's commentary is often polarizing, his observations align with patterns many others have noted. The racial dynamics of this rivalry cannot and should not be ignored, as they add layers of complexity, historical context, and emotional intensity that extend far beyond basketball courts and athletic competition. In a league where approximately 70% of players are Black, Clark's white Midwestern background has led to accusations of white privilege, amplifying her success in ways that similar achievements by Black players might not have been recognized or rewarded. This dynamic creates a complex situation where legitimate questions about media coverage, marketing decisions, and societal biases intersect with individual achievements, personal relationships, and professional competition in ways that make objective analysis extremely difficult. The challenge is separating legitimate concerns about systemic issues from personal animosity and professional jealousy. Angel Reese has been particularly vocal about experiencing racism from Clark's fanbase, and her accounts of harassment and abuse are both credible and deeply disturbing. In a candid moment on her podcast that revealed the personal cost of this rivalry, she revealed disturbing details about the harassment she's faced.
Caitlin Clark fans, the Iowa fans, now the Indiana fans, I think there's a lot of racism when it comes to it, and I don't believe she stands on any of that. But when it comes to death threats, like I'm talking about people who have come down to my address, following me home. Multiple occasions, people have made AI pictures of me naked.
Stephen A. Smith provided important context for this dynamic while acknowledging both the reality of racism and the complexity of the situation.
But you've known they were coming for you when you were waving your hands in your face to mock Caitlin Clark when you were beating her for the national championship. And you also are old enough to know that in this society, whether they want to admit it or not, they don't like seeing somebody Black coming at somebody white who is a beloved star of theirs.
However, the racial dynamics work both ways and create additional layers of complexity that make objective analysis even more challenging. Some analysts argue that Reese has leveraged racial tensions for her own benefit, positioning herself as a victim of racism while simultaneously building her brand around being the anti-Caitlin Clark in ways that exploit societal divisions for personal and professional gain. One of the most fascinating and revealing aspects of this rivalry is how both players, but particularly Angel Reese, have learned to navigate and manipulate media narratives for personal and professional gain in ways that demonstrate remarkable sophistication and strategic thinking. Reese has embraced what she calls the villain role with an enthusiasm and calculation that suggests careful planning and long-term strategic thinking. In interviews that reveal her understanding of media dynamics and brand building, she has stated that she'll take the bad guy role and continue to take that on to be that for my teammates, while predicting that I'll look back in 20 years and be like, the reason we're watching women's basketball is not not just because of one person. It's because of me too. This calculated approach to building her brand through controversy, conflict, and positioning herself as the antagonist in a compelling narrative has been remarkably successful from a business perspective. Reese has amassed over $1.8 million in NIL deals during college, partnering with brands like Reebok, Mercedes-Benz, and Coach, who are attracted to her combination of athletic ability and media attention. Her social media presence, boasting millions of followers on Instagram and TikTok, has amplified her brand, blending basketball with fashion and lifestyle content in ways that have made her one of the most marketable athletes in women's sports. The controversy surrounding her rivalry with Clark has been central to this success, generating engagement, discussion, and attention that translates directly into financial opportunities. Robert Griffin III, who has closely followed this rivalry and has extensive experience in professional sports, identified a disturbing pattern in Reese's behavior toward Clark that extends far beyond normal competitive rivalry or professional jealousy.
You guys remember last year when Angel Reese celebrated Kennedy Carter getting that flagrant foul on the hip check against Caitlin Clark? You remember that? On the sideline, just, yeah, baby, get her, you get her. Who celebrates like that for a flagrant foul on another player if they don't dislike that player?
The pattern extends beyond celebrating opponents' fouls against Clark and includes social media behavior, public statements, and on-court actions that consistently position Reese as antagonistic toward Clark, while maintaining plausible deniability through carefully crafted public statements about mutual respect and shared goals for women's basketball. One of the most revealing and problematic aspects of this rivalry is the different standards applied to each player's behavior, creating a dynamic where identical actions are perceived and judged differently based on who performs them. When Clark engages in trash talk or competitive gestures, she's often praised for her fire, competitiveness, and refusal to back down from challenges. When Reese does the same things, she faces significantly more criticism and is often labeled as unsportsmanlike, inappropriate, or unnecessarily aggressive. However, this dynamic works in reverse as well. When Reese faces criticism, it's often dismissed as racism or sexism, while similar criticism of Clark is accepted as fair commentary. This double standard has created a toxic environment where honest assessment of either player's behavior becomes politically charged. Colin Cowherd, one of the most prominent voices in sports media, provided important insight into this dynamic and the broader cultural issues it represents.
Here's a gender reality. Okay. Men can hate each other. Jordan still holds a grudge against Isaiah. Somehow it makes him more likable.
Yeah.
Men can taunt, can trash talk. If Angel Reese appears to hate Caitlin Clark, it becomes a race topic. It is outrageous. It is unfair. And I'm like, time out. Women athletes can hate rivals too.
The explosive revelations and future implications. The most explosive and potentially game-changing revelation in this ongoing saga came from former NFL quarterback Robert Griffin III, whose claims sent shockwaves through the basketball community, sports media, and social media platforms, while sparking debates that extended far beyond sports. In a series of social media posts that would generate millions of views, shares, and responses, Griffin made allegations that few others had been willing to make publicly, despite widespread private speculation about the true nature of the relationship between these two players. Griffin's initial statement was direct and unambiguous, in ways that left no room for misinterpretation. Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark. It's staring us all right in the face, but people are afraid to say it. Won't answer questions about Caitlin Clark. Gets mad when people praise Caitlin Clark. Celebrates when her teammates flagrantly foul Caitlin Clark. That's not just hate, that's jealousy and resentment. But Griffin didn't stop with general observations about behavior patterns and public interactions. In perhaps the most controversial and potentially explosive claim of all, he alleged direct knowledge from sources close to the situation. People in Angel's inner circle called me and told me I was right, and Angel Reese has grown to hate Caitlin Clark because of the media always asking her about Caitlin and being constantly compared to her. The response to Griffin's claims was swift, fierce, and revealed the extent to which this topic had become politically and emotionally charged within the basketball community and beyond. Reese called it nasty eye work and accused him of lying on this app for clout, implying fabrication, and suggesting that Griffin was manufacturing controversy for personal attention and social social media engagement. Her mother, Angel Webb Reese, dismissed it as cap, lies, and urged him to stop, adding family pressure to the public denial and suggesting that Griffin's claims were not just wrong, but potentially harmful to Angel's career and reputation. The involvement of family members in public denials suggested that Griffin's claims had struck close enough to home to generate concern about their potential impact. The reaction went beyond just the Reese family. Shaquille O'Neal warned RG3 to stop posting about Reese, threatening physical confrontation in a way that suggested O'Neal, who has business relationships with Reese, felt that Griffin's claims posed a genuine threat to her career and earning potential. The involvement of high-profile figures like O'Neal indicated that Griffin's claims were being taken seriously as potential threats to Reese's brand and marketability. Griffin's analysis went deeper than surface-level observations and drew compelling parallels to one of basketball's most famous and well-documented rivalries, providing historical context that helped explain why this dynamic might actually be beneficial for both players and the sport as a whole. He drew a compelling parallel to one of basketball's most famous rivalries.
I grew up in a time when Michael Jordan was king in the NBA. And I remember from my dad and my uncles and them all talking to me about how much Michael Jordan hated Isaiah Thomas. Hated Isaiah Thomas. Right? He hated Isaiah Thomas so much that he kept him off the 1992 Olympic Dream Team.
The comparison to the Jordan-Thomas rivalry was illuminating and provided a framework for understanding how genuine animosity between elite athletes can actually elevate both players and the sport they play, rather than damaging it. That rivalry was characterized by genuine personal hatred that was never denied or hidden, yet it contributed to some of the most compelling basketball ever played and helped elevate the NBA to unprecedented levels of popularity and commercial success. The comparison is illuminating because it suggests that hatred and rivalry, when channeled properly and acknowledged honestly, can actually elevate both players and the sport itself, rather than diminishing or damaging it.
In this situation, Caitlin Clark is Michael Jordan and Angel Reese is Isaiah Thomas. There's nothing wrong with that. Angel Reese could go on to become a Hall of Famer and have a great career.
This perspective reframes the rivalry not as something to be ashamed of, denied, or minimized, but as a natural and potentially beneficial dynamic that could drive both players to greater heights, while growing the sport's popularity, television ratings, and commercial viability. The key difference, according to Griffin's analysis, is that Jordan and Thomas never pretended to like each other, or tried to convince the public that their animosity was manufactured by media or fans. The implications of this rivalry extend far beyond the two individual players involved, and have fundamentally transformed the landscape of women's professional basketball in ways that will likely be felt for decades to come. The WNBA has experienced unprecedented growth, with viewership averaging 1.32 million per game in 2024, nearly tripling the prior season's 462,000, representing the kind of growth that sports leagues typically take decades to achieve. Multiple analysts, former players, and media personalities have identified signs of broader resentment toward Clark from other players throughout the league beyond just Reese, suggesting that this isn't an isolated dynamic between two individuals, but rather a systemic issue that affects multiple relationships and team dynamics. Players like Chennedy Carter, Dijanai Carrington, and others have been involved in incidents or made comments that suggest a pattern of antagonism toward Clark that extends beyond what could be explained by normal competitive dynamics or individual personality conflicts. The pattern includes hard fouls that seem unnecessarily aggressive, public comments that could be interpreted as dismissive or disrespectful, and social media activity that appears designed to minimize Clark's achievements or question her worthiness of the attention she receives. When viewed individually, these incidents might be dismissed as isolated occurrences or misunderstandings, but when examined collectively, they suggest a coordinated or at least widespread effort to diminish Clark's impact and recognition. The situation has become so pronounced and uncomfortable that multiple prominent figures have felt compelled to address it publicly. ESPN analyst Ryan Clark criticized the narrative, arguing it pits Black women as villains to elevate Clark, while others argue that acknowledging the reality of jealousy and resentment is necessary for honest discourse about the sport and the dynamics that are affecting its growth and development. This debate highlights one of the most challenging aspects of this entire situation: the intersection of legitimate social justice concerns with individual behavior and accountability. Ryan Clark's perspective represents the view that criticism of Black female athletes like Reese is inherently problematic and rooted in racial bias, while others argue that avoiding honest assessment of behavior because of race actually perpetuates harmful stereotypes and prevents necessary conversations about professionalism and sportsmanship. From a business and commercial perspective, this rivalry has been extraordinarily successful and has generated benefits that extend far beyond the two players directly involved. The 2023 NCAA championship game drew a record 9.9 million viewers, and WNBA attendance rose 17% in 2024, partly due to their star power, representing the kind of growth that sports marketing executives dream about but rarely achieve. Record viewership has been shattered repeatedly, with their games setting records on multiple major networks and generating advertising revenue, sponsorship opportunities, and media attention that has transformed the financial outlook for the entire league. The rivalry has attracted new fans to women's basketball, increased merchandise sales, and created a level of mainstream cultural relevance that the WNBA had never previously achieved. However, this commercial success has come at a significant cost that raises questions about the long-term sustainability of growth built on controversy and conflict. The toxic nature of much of the discourse surrounding the rivalry has led to racist harassment of both players, death threats against Reese, and a polarization of the fan base along racial lines that threatens to undermine the positive aspects of the increased attention. The harassment that both players have faced represents the darkest side of sports fandom and social media culture, where competitive rivalry becomes personal attack and legitimate criticism becomes abuse and intimidation. The fact that young women who are simply playing basketball at the highest level have to deal with threats to their physical safety, invasions of their privacy, and attacks on their character demonstrates how toxic sports culture can become when it intersects with broader societal problems. As we look toward the future of women's basketball and consider the long-term implications of this rivalry, several critical questions remain unanswered and will likely determine whether this dynamic ultimately helps or hurts the sport. Will Angel Reese eventually acknowledge the reality that many observers see, that her animosity toward Caitlin Clark goes beyond competitive rivalry and represents genuine personal dislike rooted in jealousy and resentment? Will the WNBA find a way to harness the positive aspects of this rivalry while minimizing its toxic elements? The answer to these questions may lie in embracing the rivalry rather than denying it, allowing it to exist honestly rather than forcing both players to maintain facades that no one believes.
And you know what? Those ratings will be even better if Angel Reese just comes out and says it. I dislike Caitlin Clark. I hate Caitlin Clark. Her actions show that she does. And it's why everybody's tuned in.
Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.